Chapter 21. Oh my God, Kayla gasped. The young man holding up the trapdoor looked equally shocked. Kayla? Mufumbi? She replied. It was so good to see his face. How did you get here? I heard you were missing. Are you all right? What happened? He came out of the hole in the floor. Put down the weapon and I'll tell you. With a self-conscious smile, she put the knife down. He pulled a rough-hew chair forward and offered her a seat. I like your new hairdo, he said, but the bloody face doesn't look too stellar. He rinsed a rough white cloth in the sink and handed it to her. The warm wetness felt so good. She was amazed to see how red the cloth was when she was done. Could I have that chicken? She asked as her stomach growled loudly. Absolutely. He stuck it on a plate and handed it to her along with a knife and fork. How about a soda too? He offered, pulling a can from the refrigerator and opening it. He wiped up the kitchen while she devoured the food ravenously. Then he pulled up a chair for himself and sat backwards on it. You've become a real celeb since I saw you last. She laughed bitterly. It's been a nightmare. I know you didn't set your house on fire, he said seriously. What happened? She told him everything, reliving the awful events as she spoke. That's horrible, he sympathized. My story isn't nearly as terrible, but when I got home that night, my dad was waiting for me with a friend of his who's a postal barcode code tattooer. He'd come to our house with all his equipment at my dad's request. Dad demanded that I get the tattoo right then and there. Why? Kayla asked. His tattoo pal told him the same thing your mom did about the genetic code in there. That got him thinking about how people of African descent have been so discriminated against throughout history, so he decided this is our chance to turn the tables. Our family is apparently pretty healthy. He says that since our genes have kept us down for so many centuries, now our genes are going to advance us, and we have to be ready to take advantage of this unexpected turn of events. It is sort of ironic if you think about it. Yeah, I know, but it's not right. I'm not going to give up everything I believe just because it suddenly looks like the barcode might work to my advantage. Kayla glanced at his wrist and felt relieved to see no tattoo. I admire that a lot, she said. I don't believe in what the barcode stands for, but it would also work against me. To be against it when you would gain from it, that's amazingly final level. Thanks, he said, but I couldn't do it. No matter what I'd get from it, I'd feel like a prisoner. What happened when you said no? We had a huge fight. Dad said no son of his was going to drop to the bottom of society after everything Africans had done to lift themselves up. He said, get tattooed or don't expect to live in this house. So I left. I'd heard about this place. When I was at a virtual reality site, someone told me it was around here, so I drove straight up. Where are we? This place doesn't have a name. It's just a bunch of people who don't want to be pushed around by Global One. They live all over these woods. Some are tattooed, some aren't. Nobody cares. They trade with one another for stuff. I got this job in the kitchen, and I get paid with food and clothes so I can survive. It's astral. I like it here. Where do you keep your car? She asked. I traded it for a cabin where I live, he scowled. How did you know I'd left? I emailed you to warn you about Ezekiel and Nedra, but you had gone. Your parents are freaked out. They're looking for you. Mufumbi shrugged. I hope they don't find me. I'm really happy here. What about Ezekiel and Nedra? She told him they'd joined Tattoo Generation. Everything seemed to go crazy from the time I found out how Ezekiel was betraying everyone, especially me. Mufumbi seemed doubtful. I can't believe Zeke is the enemy. He and I were tight. Why else would he be a member of Tattoo Gen? I know for sure he is a member. I don't know, but maybe there's a reason? They sat together for a moment without speaking, and after a few minutes, he pulled a pack of peppermint gum from his shirt pocket and offered it to her. Thanks, she said, taking a piece. In the morning, Kayla awoke snuggled in a warm sleeping bag. She blinked to bring the simple, neat room around her into focus. 2 windows on either side of the wooden door let in the soft morning light. Touching her forehead, she felt clean gauze and remembered Mufumbi dabbed her cuts with hydrogen peroxide and covered them. She wiggled from her sleeping bag, still clothed, and looked out the window. Outside, Mufumbi had built a fire and was cooking bacon in a pan. Last night, when he'd led her back to his cabin, it had been too dark for her to see much. Now she noticed a picnic table with a bench on either side. Morning, he greeted her when she stepped outside. He offered her a plate of bacon and eggs. How are you? Glad I ran into you, she replied, smiling softly. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't. He sat beside her on the bench and ate his eggs. You picked a perfect place to hide. These people who live in the woods would never turn you in. It's stellar the way you work together and support one another. It proves to me the barcode resistors can band together and make a difference. It reminds me of the American Revolution when people began to unite against the British. But they had leaders like Washington and Benjamin Franklin, Kayla said. We have Dave Young, he replied. What's he been able to do? She scoffed. He's still active. They haven't shut down to code yet. Maybe, she agreed doubtfully. I was thinking of heading up to find Uatona. You know there's something we never told you, because I guess we didn't want to freak you out. When you contacted Uatona, your site numbers never moved. But I saw her. She was totally real. I believe you. Uatona is a real woman. I've heard of her, but I don't think you know of her before coming to our group, did you? No. Do you think that means I'm crazy? He laughed slightly. Why would it mean that? I think you have a gift for psychic ability. We all use such a small portion of our brain at any given time. Sometimes we use one part, sometimes another. I believe we'll all eventually use our entire brain, or at least larger portions of it at once. But that will only happen if we're allowed to evolve. Maybe psychic ability will be part of the evolution, and maybe Uatona is more highly evolved too, so the two of you are able to connect. That might also be the way you found your way to me here in the woods. Kayla had learned about evolution in school, and she knew the theory that living things changed in order to adapt to their environment. People had once debated the theory, but by the year 2015 it had been accepted as fact. What do you mean if we're allowed to evolve? She asked him. Don't people and animals do that naturally over time? Not anymore, he replied, finishing the last of his food. Global One has lifted all bans on cloning. I believe the reason they want everyone coded is to make it easier to decide who will be cloned and who won't. Once people are reproduced just as they were, evolution stops. There's no change, no adaptation. The human race won't move forward. The brain will never be used at its full capacity. But what about designer genes? Kayla asked. Doesn't that change people? You'll be able to see better, run faster, hear better, on and on. That's true, he agreed, but it will be man-made evolution. People will change in ways scientists and the government think they should. Those ways might not be the changes we really need to make. He picked up the plates they'd used. Come on down to the stream with me. We can wash these dishes and keep talking. They talked for the rest of the day as they picked blueberries in the woods. At 6, Mufumbi left for work, leaving her alone, and she passed the time by reading from his pile of books using lantern light, and when he returned just before dawn, she awoke long enough to see him crawl into the roll of old blankets on the floor. Good night, she said. Night, he mumbled, and she tossed him her pillow. He tossed it back. It's okay, use it. Mufumbi gave her a pad for her sketching, and one morning he returned from the oasis with a pack of playing cards. They liked to play gin rummy, but mostly they talked. Mufumbi made so much sense to her. He had ideas about things she'd never considered. We've been headed towards this barcode for years, he said one night as they sat around their campfire. First came the credit cards, then driver's licenses, ID cards, then the face scanners, the eye scanners, the fingerprint scanners, and those DNA chip implants. But I think the barcode is different. Why? She asked. Because people wear it. It's a sign of allegiance to Global One, as well as an identifier and a genetic table. I guess that's true, she agreed. Ever since that day we were discussing how genetic sequences sometimes represent as barcodes, I've been thinking, if our genes determine who we are, and genes look like a barcode, then we already wear a barcode tattoo. Our genes are our own unique personal barcode tattoo. The next morning, Kayla woke earlier than usual, and Mufumbi wasn't there. He wasn't in the front making breakfast as usual either. Kayla stepped into her boots and went outside. The forest was unnaturally still, except for one section about 5 yards away. A breeze blew the trees and bushes around, and the colors seemed unusually vivid. She stepped forward, and a figure took form in front of her. It was Uatona. The woman beckoned her with her hand. As Kayla went closer, the image began to blur. She sensed movement in the forest, footsteps. A dog barked. Turning towards the sound, her heart slammed into her chest. The woods were full of global officers.